horror movies have been serving up wild twists and turns since before the genre was officially codified in the early 1930s. Indeed, several of the greatest pieces of horror cinema from the last 100+ years are celebrated for their mind-blowing revelations regarding certain storylines, characters, and even narrative framing devices. Beyond challenging the core truths and purposes of said films, these shake-ups rattled many viewers in the moment, and significantly changed what they expected from the medium from that point onward. The twists on this list are particularly noteworthy for how they rewrote the rules of what a horror movie can and should be. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and let's take a look at horror movie twists that rewrote the rules. And of course, there will be spoilers ahead, so proceed with caution. Starting with killing off the main star during the first act, Psycho. It's tempting to talk about the finale of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, during which viewers learn that the charmingly timid Norman Bates is actually a homicidal maniac suffering from dissociative identity disorder and some sort of Oedipal complex. Yet Hitchcock was already known for his third-act deceptions and disclosures when Psycho premiered, and this one has been talked about ad nauseum by now. So we're going with Psycho's other major narrative shocker. That presumed protagonist Marion Crane is ruthlessly butchered roughly 30 minutes into the picture, in what's arguably the most famous murder scene in cinematic history. Despite being morally questionable, don't forget she did steal thousands of dollars from her boss to help her boyfriend. Marion is an empathetic character whom most onlookers want to succeed. Therefore, having Norman stab her to death in the shower was unexpected and disturbing. What's more, Marion is played by Janet Leigh, whose A-list status at the time seemingly guaranteed that she'd be the person moviegoers followed until the end of the film. This twist was so essential to how Hitchcock wanted his masterpiece to be experienced that he prohibited people from entering the theatre once Psycho started. Plus, numerous other horror movies have employed the same subversive tactic over the subsequent decades, with Scream's opening slaughter of Drew Barrymore's Casey Becker being the chief example. Switching genres halfway into the film, From Dusk Till Dawn. There are many horror movies that switch genres during their second or third acts, including Ryan Coogler's Sinners, Takashi Miike's Audition, Ben Wheatley's Kill List, and Mimi Cave's Fresh. All of them do a fantastic job of it, but none pull it off as impactfully or legendarily as Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn. Released several years or decades before those other titles, From Dusk Till Dawn is the textbook case of a film completely changing its tone mid-movie. Initially, it's an action crime thriller about two deranged criminal brothers who kidnap a family and force them to drive to an all-night Mexican strip club so they can escape the authorities. It's an extremely intense ride whose premise could have lasted until the credits rolled. However, Rodriguez and co-writers Robert Kurtzman and Quentin Tarantino, who also plays one of the brothers, had something else up their sleeve. As it turns out, the strip club is really a vampire coven built atop an ancient Aztec temple. From there, From Dusk Till Dawn sees the brothers and the family teaming up with other patrons to battle the blood-sucking horde. Consequently, what was once a gritty and uncomfortable glimpse into unlawful escapades becomes a deliciously stylized and bonkers B-movie horror romp. Without a doubt, its midway rug pull caught just about everyone off guard. The hero is the intended victim, the Wicker Man. Not to be confused with its amusingly awful 2006 remake, 1973's The Wicker Man is such a revered slice of quintessential folk horror because its sinister surprise ending leaves both its hero and audiences feeling utterly betrayed, helpless, and hopeless. The plot centers around Sergeant Howie, a devout Christian and tenacious policeman who's summoned to an isolated Scottish village to search for a missing girl named Rowan Morrison. As he explores the island and expands his investigation, he's repeatedly told by the locals that Rowan either died or never existed. Of course, he becomes increasingly frustrated by their attempts to gaslight him, as he also becomes increasingly unsettled by their immoral and bizarre paganistic practices. Eventually, he determines that not only is Rowan alive, but that she'll soon be sacrificed to a higher power to ensure a bountiful harvest. The joke's on Sergeant Howie, though, because the truth is that he was always meant to be the May Day sacrifice. In fact, the perfectly healthy Rowan was a part of the townspeople's ploy all along. Ultimately, Howie is imprisoned in a giant wicker man that's set ablaze, with his agonizing screams coating the village's victorious singing and dancing. It's a jaw-droppingly bleak, cruel, and transgressive climax that showcased precisely how ingeniously misleading and unpredictable horror movies can be for the majority of their runtime. All the protagonists, including a child, die. Funny games. There are certain rules moviegoers expect filmmakers not to violate, with two of the most important and unforgivable being that the protagonists triumph over the antagonists by the end, and that neither children nor animals should be subjected to any serious harm. That said, the main point of cinematic provocateur Michael Haneke's deeply troubling Funny Games is to offer a meta-commentary on the joy, desensitization, and entitlement viewers likely feel as they watch violence being enacted upon victims both fictional and real. Therefore, Haneke audaciously defies those guidelines by having his sadistic pair of young men torture and murder every member of the family they've been holding hostage, including the pet dog. Simply put, and following a prolonged period of physical, mental, and emotional torment, Paul begins by killing the dog off-screen. Then, Peter fatally shoots young son Georgie with a shotgun later that night, and before long, Paul shoots patriarch George as well. The next morning, Haneke arguably depicts the most disturbing act of all by having the two men force matriarch Anna onto the family boat so they can bind her and dispassionately push her into the water to drown. Undeniably harrowing and remorseless, Funny Games demonstrated that no one is safe and nothing is off limits if a horror film has a point to prove. The killer is an impostor. Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. The fifth entry in the beloved slasher property, 1985's Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, is easily the worst film on this list, and debatably the worst film in its series. There are many reasons why people hate it, with its polarizing ending often being the primary one. In hindsight, however, the revelation that Jason Voorhees isn't the maniac behind the mask was a commendably bold swing that taught audiences to occasionally trust what's promoted on the tin rather than their own fixed assumptions. You see, immediate predecessor The Final Chapter concludes with quirky preteen Tommy Jarvis fatally splitting Jason's head open with a machete. Even so, Jason had died and come back several times before, so there was little reason for franchise fans to believe that he wouldn't be back for A New Beginning. Yet the titles of both films were entirely accurate, with The Final Chapter signifying the end of Jason's saga, before A New Beginning had disgruntled paramedic Roy Burns taking up the mantle, and kickstarting a fresh beginning for the series, as he got revenge on those whom he blamed for his son's death. Even by the mid-1980s, the burgeoning slasher subgenre had established that its iconic antagonist will really return in sequels. So A New Beginning's controversial bait and switch was a daringly resourceful and revolutionary move. It was never their deceased daughter, Don't Look Now. The 1970s were ripe with horrors and thrillers that dwelled in gritty and punishing realism, and 1973's Don't Look Now is a superb example of that. After the tragic drowning of their adolescent daughter Christine, bereaved couple John and Laura Baxter head to Venice so that John can restore an ancient church while Laura processes the loss in her own ways. Unfortunately, strange things start happening around them as soon as they arrive. Specifically, Laura interacts with an ominous pair of elderly sisters, one of whom, Heather, is a psychic who senses Christine and danger in John's future, while John repeatedly sees a figure in a red coat whom he presumes is his deceased child. All the while, reports of a serial killer on the loose loom large in the background. So what's going on? Is Christine somehow alive and running around Venice? Is John's overwhelming grief causing him to hallucinate what he's seeing or mistake a different kid for his daughter? The truth is none of the above, as John has actually been tailing a real person, who promptly slashes his throat with a meat cleaver, thereby exposing herself as the elusive serial killer and confirming that John and Heather's premonitions were foreshadowing his murder. It's a traumatically twisted and cruel resolution that set a new standard for seemingly random WTF finales. It's all a prank, April Fool's Day. When someone watches a slasher movie, they're usually guaranteed to see the central cast get knocked off one by one in imaginatively grisly ways until the mysterious killer is discovered. That expectation was especially prominent during the 1980s, when it seemed like a new slasher film came out every weekend. Much like how Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, and A New Beginning circumvented preconceived assumptions by being faithful to the promises of their titles, so too did the cleverly deceptive April Fool's Day. How? by not having any killers or murders at all. The premise, several college buddies spend spring break at the isolated mansion of their friend Muffy only to be executed shortly thereafter, was already textbook slasher plotting in 1986. By and large, it plays out as anticipated, with Muffy subjecting her friends to various pranks as people begin disappearing and dying and survival seems increasingly impossible. Eventually, protagonist Kit concludes that it's Muffy's twin sister Buffy who's been slaughtering everyone. Buffy chases Kit through the house with a knife, leading Kit to hide in the living room. Suddenly, she sees her friends alive and amused to reveal that the entire night was an elaborate test run for Muffy's planned island resort horror attraction. Like Kit, viewers were shocked to learn that they too were being pranked all along. The killer vanishes and will return. Halloween. Slasher movies existed long before Halloween came out, with titles such as Peeping Tom and Black Christmas predating it. Nevertheless, it was John Carpenter's 1978 masterpiece that gave the horror subgenre the spotlight it needed to flourish over the last half-century. A major reason why is that it popularized numerous components of the slasher landscape, including the triumphant final girl surviving her ordeal and the shadowy killer disguising himself with a mask. Of course, another momentous aspect of Halloween is its unsettling closing shake-up regarding the fate of Michael Myers. It's an ending as famous as any other horror movie climax. After finding Myers strangling heroine Laurie Strode in the Doyle house, Myers' childhood psychiatrist Dr. Samuel Loomis shoots him 6 times, knocking him off the balcony. Initially, he lies motionless on the lawn below. However, when Loomis checks on Myers moments later, Myers is gone, and audiences are left stunned as his haunting breathing implies that he's waiting to return. Prior to Halloween, slasher villains tended to definitively die or overtly live at the end of their films. So having the bogeyman only temporarily be vanquished, with the promise of him resuming his killing spree should a sequel be made, was as startling as it was influential. Today, the trope has become a core part of the slasher formula. And finally, the protagonist was dead all along, The Sixth Sense. M. Night Shyamalan is synonymous with twist endings. Although he's had some great ones and some awful ones over the years, it's the earth-shattering revelation that wraps up The Sixth Sense that remains his most astonishing, brilliant, and everlasting gotcha moment. Long story short, the plot revolves around a child psychologist named Malcolm who befriends and supports a disturbed boy named Cole as he wrestles with the trauma of seeing ghosts. Beyond his typical professional desire to help the young man, Malcolm hopes that his work with Cole will help him reconnect with his estranged wife, Anna, and find redemption for failing to help a similarly troubled patient, Vincent, who as an adult shot Malcolm and then himself as the film opened. As the iconic line goes, Cole indeed sees dead people. And during the last act, Malcolm realizes that he's one of the lost souls Cole is talking about. The final moments of The Sixth Sense find Malcolm reflecting on all the signs he missed regarding Vincent's gunshot being fatal and Anna's detachment really being her grieving process. Undoubtedly, The Sixth Sense rekindled the dead all along twist for years to come, and the gimmick of catching all the clues upon later rewatches is now a staple, not only of Shyamalan's filmography, but of movies with surprise endings overall.